to Open Source Friday. I hope you're having a great Friday. My day is like halfway done, so I'm excited to head into the weekend. If you're new to this like live stream, this is Open Source Friday. We basically chat with open source maintainers or core contributors about their projects and efforts for us to learn about like how we can eventually contribute or how we can start our own projects as well. I want to hear from the I see people in the audience. I want to know where you're tuning in from. Sometimes people are from like all over the world, and I think it's really cool. One person is hilarious, and I said, "Where you're tuning in from?" And they said, "From chat." So thank you for that. But I won't talk any longer. Today's guest is Sean Larkin, and I would love for him to introduce himself.
Hey,
Hey,
how's it
Sean.
going? Yeah, so I'm Sean Larkin. I live in Seattle, Washington. I work at Microsoft on the OneDrive SharePoint code base. I'm a software engineer, and my role there is that I am essentially a monorepo janitor. And so we have all of our front end code for the OneDrive SharePoint experience is in a single monorepo, and so all of the tooling and infrastructure and everything, my team that we work on maintains. But I think, in the open source world, you all might know me as one of the maintainers of Webpack. So I've been on the Webpack core team and maintaining it since 2026, or I'm sorry, 2016. And I
Why
guess
did I
I,
say wow to that? Like I was like, wow, 2022.
yeah. I mean, with how things are going, I'll probably be maintaining it until 2026 as well, if not longer. But I also have spent some time on the Angular CLI. I helped integrate Webpack with that, in addition to maintaining an open source project called RushStack, which is a monorepo orchestration tool that my team at ODSP maintains. And so it helps you do handle giant monorepos, powered by Node.js and TypeScript, and it's really super cool. Maybe I'll spam links later to share all those things. But I think, here today we're going to talk about Webpack, and I'm sure, chat. There's probably not a hand, up here who will say I've never used Webpack indirectly or directly. So I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, this is awesome. Wait, you do a lot of like repo maintenance, it sounds like in your full-time
Yeah.
day job, in your maintainer job. What does I know this is like off script, but what does that look like for you? Like just for other people to get an idea of like what maintaining a repo can look like if they were interested in doing that in the future.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny you mentioned that. Like my day to day, so I'm up really early in the morning. So I get up at 4:30 a.m. I go work out from 5 to 7, and then shower, whatever. And then so right in the morning, most of my team's not up until 10 a.m. Or maybe 11. So I get this nice 2.5 hour window to contribute to my open source projects, right? So I'm not the top contributor of Webpack. We have a full-time engineer on the project, but I try to drive the backlog, heartbeat, and then things that drive me crazy, I'll go in and contribute to. But I think every day I'll maybe spend about an hour and a half to 2 hours just contributing, triaging issues, looking at a project backlog for multiple projects. And I think, and then I start working on our code base at Microsoft. So then I jump into what we call ODSP Web, and I do my day-to-day work there. An example of one of the things that I just landed in our monorepo is we just upgraded from Jest 27 to Jest 29, and that took about a month's worth of work because you have to fix a lot of broken tests. It's a lot of code that everyone else knows. They're the product experts, but I'm not. So it's a lot of onboarding into broken tests that you've never touched before, and it's a good time. But I think and then probably by the end of the day, I hang out with my family. I've got 2 kids and spend time with my wife. Maybe do a little video gaming. But yeah, that's my contribution. I never do it at night. I think my worst work comes after work.
Interesting. Wow. You have a very full day, And that's interesting that you wake up so early. I actually do my best work at night. Like if it's the morning, I'm my brain's just mush. But I will also highlight where like other people's comments. Somebody said OneDrive. Wow, so I guess they're really impressed by that. People are tuning in from Colombia and India and Romania and Tigray. I hope I even said that country right. Um, Netherlands, all over. Like it's really excited. Oh, I see Laura, my friend, tuning in from San Francisco and people from South Africa. So awesome. Thank you so much,
Wow,
y'all,
very cool.
for tuning in. I know all over the world they all came to tune in about this. Okay, so we did say that many people would know about Webpack that are watching, but
Yeah.
there's always new developers maybe tuning in, wondering what this is. So would you mind just describing what Webpack even is for folks who don't know?
Yeah. So it can turn into like a 30-minute explanation, but I'll give like the 5-minute explanation. So before the browser was able to support having JavaScript modules, right? There, we had them in Node.js, and then a new spec came out that designed this like ESM module format, ECMAScript modules. And so what Webpack did before the browser even had support for modules was it let you write your code using the module syntax. And then using this build tool, it allowed you to bundle them up into something that actually ran in the browser and emulated the same behavior. So like, there was a time 3 or 4 years ago where people couldn't even write ESM modules in the browser. And, Webpack was the only way that you could write that ESM module in your source code and then have it run and behave like it should in the browser itself. But it does so many more things. It introduced this technique called code splitting, which allowed you to load only parts of the code or the code that you needed up front, and then lazy load, additional functionality later, and made it really easy to do with like a great developer experience. Uh, but it also had support for other like different types of assets that you would import into your code. So like this paradigm of importing CSS or importing like an image or a URL, something that's really canonical when you use like React, you might import an SVG and use it as a React component. These are things that Webpack helped pioneer. And now modern bundlers today probably all support these features.
Interesting. Thank you for that explanation. Even Laura, I believe Laura's a developer advocate, started off as a technical writer. She said she actually doesn't know Webpack and doesn't have much of a web dev background. For me, I do have a software engineering background, but I've always been like, Webpack's just been in the background. I'm like, I know I'm using it. I don't know what's happening though. Like I know,
For
and
sure.
like when I heard, huh? Sorry.
I said for sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know like my husband, he's had tickets where he's like doing stuff with Webpack, and I'm like, oh my gosh, looks scary. So I'm excited for this Twitch stream because I think it'll just help to like demystify some stuff for me, and like even just your explanation helped a lot. Um, let's see. My other question too, and I think you kind of just touched on this a little bit, but like why do projects even need a web bundler in general? What problem does it solve?
I think so. Like technically today, if you like pop open, your dev tools and Microsoft Edge or Chrome or whatever, you can technically write modules. Like it works natively in the browser now. It works natively in Node. However, there are still some performance implications when you ship just raw ESM modules, and a lot of these things just depend on context, right? Like our monorepo is like an 800 package monorepo for OneDrive SharePoint, or like we almost have like 1,000 packages with lots of different code paths and things like that. And so when your application gets bigger, especially if it's like a single page application, let's say you have, I think the cutoff is like if you have more than 5,000 modules and you just try to ship them all loosely, natively in the browser, it actually has a significant runtime impact on how long it takes for your page to load. And so I think still to this day, the best practice in having a web application that is accessible on lower end markets, lower end devices, is to bundle your code, right? And so there are tools out there today which still like it's kind of like saying bundling helps you achieve kind of the middle ground, because there's a lot of benefits to just shipping like loose ES modules. One example would be like a dev server. There are tools out there today like Vite, which is another bundler abstraction that when you're in your local development environment lets you just ship your modules raw or loose, right, without any bundling involved. But in your production mode, you still want to be able to bundle because it gives your end users the most performant loading page. And that's significantly important, especially, like I said, for those who are on low-end devices or have like flaky internet connectivity, who aren't using a MacBook, one M1 chip, etc.
Love it. Okay, that made a lot of sense. And yeah, it provides that accessibility. I've been hearing a ton of hype about V as well. Just highlighting more comments from the audience because I like to interact with them. Alexander said, I use Webpack to inject custom experiences as web modules directly into my company's CMS is primarily my deployment method. And Laura talks a little bit more about her background, saying her background's in Python and a bit of server-side WebAssembly. So awesome. Okay, so you talked about what problem web bundlers solve. You talked about what Webpack even is, and I heard you mention that like Webpack does a lot more than what you just mentioned, like earlier. So like, what continues to make Webpack relevant in 2023? As to me, like I came into software development in like 2018, so that was like the first like bundler that I was introduced to. And now there's like so many more, but like what continues to make it relevant? What cool new updates and releases have you all like had, or what else does it do? Yeah.
I think honestly, like the number one like thing that keeps Webpack relevant is actually all the other bundlers that are out there, right? We have been the de facto dominant. We own 90%. I don't know, of the market share of tool, like the development experience. And so like with other tools like Vite, which is technically just roll up under the hood, but like bundling abstractions. So tools like Vite, or even just roll up itself. Even frameworks that are doing like custom things, or like native tools like RSPack, ESBuild, SWC. Like, I have to think of like the full list, but all of these different projects came at bundling at a different angle. Some are like, hey, we're fast because we do like 5% of the things Webpack does, or we're using, Go or Rust as our native runtime to execute the code. Or, Vite, a good example, right? They're using rollup under the hood, but to make their dev experience fast, they ship loose modules. So there's no actual bundling in your dev mode, right? So all of these different things have, or like innovations, have allowed us to basically kind of step up our game, right? These days we release every Wednesday. A lot of it is just bug fixes or in better TypeScript definitions. But there are a lot of things that we're doing for, let's say, like Webpack 6. Like a great example is like, we want to enable people to have this same, like, I just got started using Vite and it's fast and I don't have to care about configuration. And so we have these two awesome features in Webpack that we're lining up. One called presets, which is essentially the equivalent of a Vite plugin. If you actually look at a Vite plugin, all it does is take configuration and hide it from the user. So you can say like Webpack preset React, and there's your React experience. We want people to just install one plugin and just say, okay, let's go, and have a great dev experience. The second thing is we want to do the same ES module like dev server capability. Now, Webpack, I don't know if we'll ever like ship that ourselves, right? Because usually a tool on top of it would be a great candidate to use this capability. But what we're going to do is like we want to have a great ES module output story, so that similar to what Rollup does today, so that people who want to make these cloud packs or Snowpack or like these loose module servers can just go ahead and do so, and the primitives exist, right? So I think those are the two main things that are like on our board for developer experience, and we think it kind of like elevates, you know, we want to elevate the user experience and lower the barrier to entry for people who are just getting started, right? And a lot of the feedback we've seen has been just, I want to be able to just install one thing and then start coding. Not everybody is like me who's passionate about making tools and want to, they just want to write front end code, and we want to enable people to do that better and to do it faster.
Yay, I'm so excited about the future of like how it's going to become even more accessible. And I actually really love what you said is you're relevant because of these other tools as well. It's kind of like when, people have these arguments on like Tailwind versus CSS or, React versus Next.js versus all these other things. And it's just like, these exist, Vue, whatever, these exist because these other ones exist, and they're or these frameworks or whatever exist because these other frameworks exist, and they're pulling inspiration from each other and growing together and getting better. And each of these, I don't think there's like one that's better than the other. It's just like this works for this person and this tool works for another person. So I really love the way that you said that.
Yeah, and like there are some things that like separate Webpack from these other tools. I think, like one example, right? At Microsoft, the premier bundling tool is Webpack. We've explored every other single tool.
Yeah.
We've tried Rollup, we've tried, ES Build, we've attempted other different things, but the number one key I think for Webpack that speaks to us is flexibility, right? A lot of teams at Microsoft move slowly, or they are working in legacy code bases, or they're supporting multiple bundling formats, or they have really complex challenges. And so the flexibility of Webpack, its deep API, broad features really allow people to continue to support legacy scenarios in addition to still moving forward with new technologies. I think a great example is like in OneDrive, for example, we just celebrated a 3-year project of finally getting rid of AMD modules, right? So we were still using required.js and AMD modules in some of the experiences for OneDrive. And, there would be no way that you could switch to another bundler because none of these other bundlers would support this legacy format. And so, like this is just kind of one test, like one drop in the bucket of why we choose at Microsoft to use, Webpack for a majority of our scenarios. But that being said, maybe some of the people in chat, they don't have that. Maybe they're just building a simple, application or like a static website or a blog. Like check out Parcel or try Webpack's minimal experience, or the great thing here is that there's lots of tools out there that solve different scenarios. And I think, that's what also makes it really nice is that we get all this different inspiration from these tools to help solve these scenarios too.
Love that. Love that so much. I do want to remind people in the chat to follow the code of conduct rules, be respectful, be kind, because this is a GitHub Twitch, so we don't want to get banned from a GitHub live stream. But that was a really great way to put it. And before we jump into the demo, so just so people know, right? I did name this a little bit of a spicy take type of title, right? But just because this is not going to be like, we're proving why Webpack is relevant. We don't need to like actually prove that. We'll see it through the demo. We'll see it through Sean's passion for the project as well. So just want y'all to keep that in mind. Okay, before we jump into the demo, I'm just curious of like how you even got involved in like maintaining the project. What even inspired you? Why are you even excited about it?
Oh man, this is a long story, and I'll do my best to summarize this in a quicker story. So, reverse back to 2015. I'm working in some random like contract job. I've never touched Webpack in my life, but I start like I've been used to Grunt and Gulp and all of these like task runners that concatenate modules together. don't have these like cool dev servers. And so like when I first tasted the Webpack experience, I remember like launching a command, seeing this interactive dev server, changing some code, watching it refresh before my eyes, and like instantly I was hooked. Like I remember getting like goosebumps on my arms because I was like, this is so cool. Like where have I been that I've never known about this tool? And so when I went to my next job, I was just obsessed. I was just like, let's get everything on Webpack. Like, I don't care what framework we're doing. Like, let's just go. And from there, I started realizing that, this next company gave me the opportunity to speak at to like go to a conference. But then I found out you could submit talks to conferences, which then they'll pay for your hotel and your travel, right? So like I submitted a talk that was like how to use Webpack and Angular, this was at like an Angular conference that was really big at the time, NGConf. And so they accepted my talk, which was like blew my mind, first of all, because like in the back of my head, I'm like, cool, I get another free conference to go to. But essentially, like I gave this talk and I loved it. I loved inspiring people how to use it. I loved teaching people how to get started, demystifying some of the complexity. And then it led me to actually working with the project. I would message them, reach out, ask questions, because everybody in the ecosystem or at these conferences would be like what's the roadmap? Who are the maintainers? Like, so I went and investigated these things, and eventually, it's kind of crazy. I was on a podcast with Kent C. Dodds one time. I just said, hey, I heard that the Webpack team is going to be on this podcast, and I reached out and I said, hey, can I just be a panelist? I just want to be in the background and just like see these guys live and maybe talk to them. I don't like just ignore me. I just want to be here in the moment because I was so excited about this team and the work that they were doing. And he was like, okay, a little apprehensive, but he said, fine, whatever. And the day before the podcast was released, his like advertisement was like introducing the Webpack core team, and my face is there next to these three people, and I'm like, oh my gosh, And so like behind the scenes, I've been talking with this team for a while, maybe about a month, but that was when they were like, do you want to join the team? And I was like, yes, of course, like. And so, that's kind of how it was kind of luck, right? And just continuously being involved and like showing my passion for wanting to help. And, I like my following, I kind of gained from just going on Twitter and like responding to people complaining about Webpack, right? Because back when I joined, we had terrible documentation. We had lots of rough edges around the API. Like, the dev experience was really not enjoyable. And so like, I just jumped in where I could, and, I hardly touched the code itself, but I just tried to like make an impact where I could, in addition to getting the project funded eventually. But, that's a whole nother story I can talk about. But yeah, I think that's in short, how I ended up, on Webpack.
Yeah, wow, you're this is impressive. Like you put yourself out there. No, seriously. And I think more people should like learn about that kind of story or that pathway, because like you put yourself out there, you try to fill in the gaps that you saw of like
Yeah.
developers have questions, or like, you know what I mean, you just jumped in, you're like, let me help to improve this documentation, and it brought you in a place where now you're one of the maintainers, and you get to do more and more talks. That's awesome. So for folks wondering, that's a good path. You kind of were like a DevRel, like
Yeah, my initial like responsibilities for Webpack was being a DevRel.
wow,
And like in addition to, there were some initial features, I like maybe I'm the top 6 contributors on the project. I did do a
yeah,
lot of like conversions and like minimal stuff, but
yeah,
especially when I got started. But like I just did whatever I could at the time, and I think that was enough, and it really did help the project's perception and mind share and getting people involved, like getting frameworks to use it, put
yeah,
it in their docs. Like those are all perfect ways that you can start, contributing to an open source project. It doesn't
yeah.
just have to be code. I mean, I do enjoy coding and implementing, like adding new types and technical documentation and like doing really deep dives on Webpack now to teach other people. But I like my
Yeah.
goal now is I just want to enable more contributors to contribute, right? Because I'm not the most brilliant engineer in the world, but I can help bring people to the water to take a drink.
I love that. That's definitely DevRel spirit. Someone named Isaac said that's awesome, and someone named Bahir said this story was inspiring. I agree with them. Okay, so we learned about Webpack. We learned about why you're into it. Let's see a little bit of a demo.
Okay, okay. Yes, absolutely. So, there are so many features that you have with Webpack. I just want to get super simple, right? And so it may not be like the most intricate demo, but I think it kind of showcases exactly what it does, right? So the easiest way to get started actually is to just use npx, right? In your terminal, if you have Node installed in npm, you can use npx to actually just access Webpack CLI. So what I did here in this situation, I've got a file under source index, and it just imports 2 JavaScript modules, and we're just console logging it. There's nothing fancy here. And you can see here, this module in A, this is a ES module, right? Because we're using the export default syntax. And then here in module B, we're using common JS modules, right? So module.exports, this was the old module system in Node.js, right? So here in my code space, I can just run npx webpack and then mode production. And what it'll do is automatically take this code and build a bundle out of it. So this is already minified. And technically, since we're not using any web APIs, I can just run this in Node, right? So we can see if it technically works, right? So if we're just reading this code, we should see something that says like, hello, GitHub Twitch. So let's just give it a try, okay? So we go node dist main.js, and there we go. And so that's that's Webpack in its simplest form. But what I like to do is, there's also some other basic features that you can get. So one thing I'll call out here, if you've used Webpack, most people complain about the configuration. But if you're literally just writing JavaScript modules, you're not doing anything fancy with CSS. You're not if you're just writing really simple code, like you can see here, there is no configuration. Like this was one of the things we shipped in Webpack 5, which was just like, let's make some really safe assumptions, right? Like your entry point is going to be source index.js. The output is automatically dist main, right? So you can go ahead and just run Webpack without even having a configuration. And I think, this is great for people if they just want to start understanding like what the heck is a module, or like how do these things work. I'll showcase one other feature, which is like how you would use code splitting. So there's another scenario where, let's say you don't want to load some code right away and you want to lazy load it. Well, Webpack uses the dynamic import syntax to emulate this behavior. So let's just say like, okay, export default, let's just lazy loaded. Okay, great. And what we'll do here is, if I want to lazy load this code, I can just say something like, I guess in its simplest form, we can just literally say lazy loaded module equals await, and then the dynamic import, and then the path to our module, right? So when I build this code, what Webpack will do, let's just make it, we could just do it in production mode. Mode production. We can see here that now at the top in our output feedback, we've actually generated 2 bundles, right? So this bundle here automatically will only load when this line is executed, right? So this is maybe a poor example, right? Because I'm not using some asynchronous API to like invoke this function or this identifier. But a common pattern here would be like, let's say, I guess, window.setTimeout, right? Geez, I never use window.setTimeout, but we can just give it a try. And I think the duration is at the end. It is. Thank goodness. I can say const get C or get lazy code equals a function that returns a dynamic import.
Okay.
Let's see. Equals yes. And we'll make it an async function
Okay.
that returns a dynamic import of C. Okay, great. And then I'll say get lazy code. Await get lazy code.
Okay.
Since we're doing some async here. Okay. So this would be maybe more of a canonical way that you would expect this to look like. But the point here is that only when this function is called does this bundle get invoked, right? So the whole point is like, if you have a bunch of code that you don't use in your browser, why, you can lazy load that until
Yeah.
you actually need it. A great example is like modals or pop-ups or things that are temporal, things that don't exist in your user experience at first
Mhm.
and then shows up later. So
Yes. Oh wow. Keep going. Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I
no,
was. I was
and that's about it. Honestly, I think this is a
yeah.
great like just get started with Webpack, just taste what it feels like, and have a no config experience. What we're looking for in Webpack 6 is that we want to just if you do want to have a full experience, we're going to enable this thing called presets, which all it
Mm,
does, just like a Vite plugin, is abstract configuration. So you can just say like Webpack preset React, Webpack preset Vue, or Solid.js or whatever framework you want, and that's the goal, right? People can just get started right away without caring about the bundler, but then still have the opportunity to extend it later.
yeah. That was a great demo. I will say like that really kind of like made it easier for me to visualize and broke it down for me. So I like these Twitch streams because I'm like, I don't get to code every day anymore, but I'm like getting exposure to things and being like, oh, that's how this has always worked. I'm like, it's in the background. I'm just using it, but I don't know how or why I'm using it. So this was great.
Of
Someone
course.
asked a question about Rust being behind the scenes in Webpack. Is that a thing? Like, are y'all using Rust? I'm
We don't
confused by
use
that.
Rust directly. There are some like open issues where we want to explore areas to do native performance, right? Like one
Okay.
example is like our parser is using Acorn.js, which is like the de facto JavaScript parser. We could potentially see performance benefits, but it does entail rewriting some pretty complex code in Webpack. So it's on our backlog, but it's not like something we have as a high priority. That being
Yeah.
said, we have been actively collaborating with a team based out of ByteDance who
Ooh.
created RSPack. RSPack is essentially a Rust drop-in replacement for like a Webpack supporting the plugins and the loaders. One of the things that I would love to see, right, is this idea of like a strict mode. So although
Mm.
RSPack um, doesn't support all of the legacy features yet that Webpack does, it would be
Yeah.
so cool for us to be able to just say like, well, if you're using a set of like strict guidelines where you're not having to support a bunch of old features, we could just say
Yeah.
like strict bundling true, and it invokes RSPack behind the scenes, right? And so
Yeah.
it's been shown that RSPack has like a load of huge performance gains.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, I would even love to see in the future, maybe we merge projects, or like, our maintenance team and their maintenance team work together to keep not only our APIs in sync, but to find other ways to collaborate, because we're honestly, these things are just better together, especially if you have
Yeah.
this like API that works exactly the same, or maybe it's a specification. But yeah, it's super exciting, and like they built almost everything out of Rust with it, and it's great. And like I spent like 2 months learning Rust just to catch up with the hype, and I think
Oh.
it's a gorgeous language to write. I think it's really fun. Like lifetimes are like are kind of annoying. But like once you get used to the concepts, it's really great. But one of the
Yeah.
things that I think we want to keep, um, we have found is that you can't really write a tool in Rust completely that needs a plugin system or integrations, right? Because if you build a plugin for your tool in Rust, you have to recompile everything, right? And
Gotcha.
so the story feels really bad, and it really raises this, how would I say this, barrier to entry for people wanting to contribute, or even just get started writing an integration. So I think like we still think that Webpack has that sweet spot where it has a really great API and a really low barrier to entry for writing integrations. But we would love to have something like a super fast mode or a strict bundling mode that we could just turn on. So like people with simple projects instantly win.
Love it. I haven't tried out Rust yet, but this is exciting. And then I didn't know that like you all were collaborating with
Yeah.
Byte. That's like TikTok engineers, right?
Right.
So
Yeah. So the ByteDance team are the authors of RSPack, right? And so they're very, it's funny because they're also contributing to RushStack, which we own, but we actively maintain as well. It's really kind of cool how much shared infrastructure and contributions are going on between ByteDance, their team, and our
yeah,
team, and like even my teams at Microsoft that contribute as well.
awesome. Just a couple of people saying that that was a great example, really great demo. One person and someone said thanks for the awesome feedback from what you just mentioned about Rust. It looks like one person asked, "Does Webpack out of the box have tree shaking?"
Yeah, like I mean, out of the box it does. Like I could even show in if you wanted to pull up the shit like the shit. Yeah, I can just go ahead and show an example of this. So I think one of the cool things, like let's say for an example, you take a package that has a bunch of modules, right? Lodash ES is a perfect example. So the only rule
Mm,
is that you have to use an ES module package, right? So I'm using Lodash ES here. Oops, let's make that bigger again. So if I try to, like I'm just using one export from it, and let's just say I use this function, which all it does is unique a bunch of entries in an array. So you get like a distinct set. So if I go ahead and bundle this in production, you'll see that we've only added, it's still only 2.5 kilobytes minimized. Or actually, wait, let me see. It should be a little bit smaller, I think. Let me just remove these imports just to make sure. I can't remember what the minified size is, but like by default, like Lodash as a whole package can be somewhere up to like 60, 70 kilobytes.
oh
But
dang.
if I just use this, um, one, two. Okay, here we go. So if I just use unique here, there we go. There we go. Yeah, it's much smaller, much smaller. So you can see here that it gives us, 4.75 kilobytes total.
Nice.
Yeah, so
Awesome.
this is automatically tree shaking, right? If I actually built this code in development mode, we don't perform this tree shaking out of the box. So like if we look at our main file, now we have about, I think it compiles to being something like 80 kilobytes, right?
Ooh,
So
oh
it
wow.
significantly reduces. So it's basically shaking the tree of a bunch of code that's not actually used in the library.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. It looks like they said awesome. Thank you. All
Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah, no problem.
All right, wait. Wow, it's all we already like hit the 40-minute mark. So with that, I switch. I can't believe it. I didn't feel like we were talking for that long, but um, with that, we'll switch into some of the other like just questions about like your journey and your background and stuff like that. We already
Yeah.
talked about how you ended up doing DevRel for Webpack. So I'll go into just wondering like what are the challenges that you've encountered as a maintainer. Um, I like to tell people about like how rewarding it is, but I also like to be realistic. So I'm curious from your perspective, what are the challenges that you've experienced? Oh, gosh, why
So
does my cat
many, and
always
there's
need
the cat just wants to be involved. It's okay. I would say, it's hard to put these into a specific order. So like I did write down a list of challenges because I didn't want to forget about any. I would say that I think some of the biggest challenges that I think like we really tried to tackle at Webpack, like one is like paying for people, right? Or like continuing to support funding. Initially, when I joined the team at Webpack, the original creator, Tobias Koppers or Sokra, he was only working on Webpack for 5 hours a week and like as a side project, right? And this is when it was starting to take a huge uptick. So I asked him, I said, like, is this something you would like to do full time if we could find a way to pay you for it? And he said, yeah. And so like one of the things that was so hard was actually trying to fully fund a full-time software engineer, through donations and sponsorships, right? And so that was super hard, and it required a lot of like relationship making, kind of awareness around this problem. It required a lot of teaming up with other organizations to help find a fiscal sponsor. um, but like we tried a bunch of different methods. So we used Open Collective. We also started writing grants, right? So like when the economy was better, you could actually write a tech grant. And like for example, Mozilla had a an open source grant program, and so we wrote one for implementing WebAssembly support into Webpack as like a native module type. And we got awarded like $150,000 grant for that. And I like that was so cool. And I had never written a grant before, but like that's one of those things you like have to learn how to do if you want to learn how to fund a project. So I think like funding projects is so hard, and there's no like one right way to do it. But we think like we've done a really great job and really paved a path for other open source projects to start doing it. Um,
I love that.
one of
No,
the
I
other
was
things that I think is super. Oh yeah, go ahead.
no. Go ahead, go ahead. I'll comment on the funding after, but keep going. This is like good tips. Like I never even
Yeah.
thought of a tech grant, but keep going.
Yeah. So I think other things like relating to money is, like it's really hard because you don't want to like incentivize people to contribute for money, right? Because then you don't get people's best code. What we want to do is try to reward them for their loyalty and contributing to the project. And so like that's a huge challenge in itself. And like when money is in like situations, it causes problems. And so like dealing with those problems it can be a challenge. I think this is another challenge that we've come across is just burnout, right? Like if you don't take care of yourself, you don't take breaks, you don't like give yourself space to be yourself, deal with your other stresses, like giving yourself permission to go work on other things, like you will burn out. And it's not a matter of if, it's a win. And so like, it happened to be for a little bit. I had to take a 2-year break from working on Webpack while I was doing some really time intensive work at Microsoft. So like during that 2 years, I was driving an initiative on the Microsoft Edge team to ship Edge on Linux. And like, honestly, I could not balance the amount of work. And you felt this like cyclical guilt. And so like, I just said, okay, I'm going to take a break from the project. I can always come back. And I think reminding your contributors and maintainers, like it's okay to take a break. It's okay to jump back in. I think really makes a huge difference, because I think sometimes people just feel this inherent responsibility to be able to like this inherent responsibility, like if I don't continue working on this code, it just falls apart, right? And that's not always the case. So I think that's important. And I think probably the last one that like I haven't found an answer for is just having better diversity in open source. Like one of the things, like maybe I'm not the most equipped because I'm just a white guy, right? I don't understand the inherent challenges. So the most I can do is empathize. And one of the things, like the biggest challenge is, how do you ask somebody who's in a marginalized group to do free work, which is essentially what open source is a majority of the time. And so, yes, doing open source has afforded me opportunities. Like, it helped me get my job at Microsoft. It helped me like go to tech conferences. But like, that's not always a guarantee. And there's always the challenge of diversity in itself. Like, some people may say, well, that's also my privilege that helped me get that. And like, I recognize that and understand that. So the unanswered question is like, how do I find how do I not ask people to do free work who are in marginalized groups, but at the same time still foster a way that doesn't prevent instant burnout, or still elevate these contribution opportunities with way less stress or overhead?
I really loved all of your answers. Someone even mentioned like really great soft and technical skills on display here. I see a comment that I'm not really loving. Not gonna call the person out, but I'm not able to block or mute LinkedIn comments. So please like watch yourself, please. But there's a couple of comments I have. One on financing open source. I think using tech grants, I haven't even heard of that as an option before. So I love that you brought that up. I always like hear about how different, like how open source maintainers are like doing different strategies to fund their projects. And I love that you brought up tech grants, because right now what I've just been aware of is like Open Collective, GitHub sponsors, um, and also like we have GitHub Accelerator or different like accelerator programs that'll like maybe give you a little bit of money for the moment. But I love the option of a tech grant. The other thing that you brought up about burnout is so important. I think it's so easy to fall into that as a maintainer, because you feel like you have this responsibility to keep the project going, and you like, especially since your project's used by so many people, like so many different companies, you're like, if I stop, will it all fall apart? And I feel like that a lot, not just for like, I don't really maintain that many big projects or anything, but just in general, like when I was doing a nonprofit coding bootcamp, I was like, nobody can do this except for me. And my therapist was like, trust me, there are more people that could do what you're doing. Like, he's like, he had that similar experience on like, he wanted to quit his job because he was so exhausted, and he was like, they'll never find anyone else like me. And when he came back to visit, they literally found someone that like even looked like him. So that made me that made me realize, you know what, in projects or in different things, I'm not always needed. Like my help is helpful, like my knowledge is helpful, but they can find somebody else. And the last thing you brought up was around diversity. And that is a question I was planning to ask you anyway. So I'm glad you brought it up.
For
And I
sure.
agree with you. Like, for me, even getting into open source, I kind of didn't see the point at first, because I was like, I already get paid to code and I don't have time to do free work. So
Exactly.
that does make sense as a problem. I think it's we got to figure out a better way to make open source more sustainable, like financially possible, and then also just explaining to people the benefits and creating awareness around
Yep.
these projects, and just making sure it's an inclusive environment that people would want to be in. Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, you make me like, you're giving me kind of good ideas, things that I haven't thought about, right? Which is like raising awareness about the benefits. Like, why should my story be unique? Like, why should it just be me who ends up on an open source project from being passionate about it, and then gets a job later from being involved in the ecosystem, right? Like, maybe there's something like, something that just comes to mind is like having this like, not intern program, but like this ability to like roster yourself on an open source project, and your activity slowly like puts you on a list of potential, employers might be like, hey, I need somebody who needs to like, I need somebody who contributes a bunch to Webpack or understands how dev tools work or modules work. And like, you know, seeing that, like maybe elevating those opportunities so that they're more common, right? And maybe that will help people be like, oh yeah, I totally want to be in open source more.
Yeah, no, I love that suggestion. That's awesome. I'm just gonna highlight things that people said. Someone said just I just open sourced a project for my GitHub for college
Yes.
students. Congrats. That's awesome.
Nice.
And Kevin saying said, I think in regards to how you've explained Webpack, you can now explain it to his kids.
Nice, nice. Yeah, if you can explain it to a 5-year-old, any dev can jump in. So yeah, that's great.
Right. And then somebody said, "Thanks for mentioning Mozilla grants. This was new to me. It was new to me as well. I didn't even consider that as an option for people to continue their projects." And Chrissy said, "For the diversity part, I think supporting programs like Outreachy could be a good start." Yeah.
That's a great, and I'll totally look into that because like I want to have a great answer for this story. Like
Yeah.
it I don't think anybody has a good one yet, and it'd be great to pave the way if we can.
Yeah, love that. I think we kind of like almost went through all of those questions, and I know we have a hard time limit. So I want to move into the non-technical fun questions I like to ask. Is that okay with you, or did you have any
Yes.
other things you wanted to add?
Oh,
Okay, perfect.
honestly, so I also double checked. I have like probably we can go over 10 minutes. I double checked with my manager, so we're good.
Oh, awesome. Okay,
Yeah,
I
so if
guess
you want to go over 10 minutes, just, go ahead.
the only other thing I think I skipped is like how can people contribute to Webpack? I guess it might like for larger projects when you're new to an open source project, it might be a little bit hard. But like what are other things that people can do?
Yeah, so like there's two main ones that like come to mind, right? So like one of the cool things, I'll give three. So the first one is you can contribute just by going to our open source repo, right? So github.com, webpack/webpack. And we have a contributing.md markdown file, which like gives you a huge overview of how to contribute. And then the second thing that I think like, so that's how you get kind of onboarded or get started, which is great. And then I think the second thing you should go look at is our one project board. So like I spent 2 months with our core team, the last couple months merging all of our priorities into one GitHub board, right? So you can go to our project board, like I can share a link afterwards, or, maybe I'll just copy the link to you and then that can be a
Yeah,
resource for folks.
yeah,
And so like this gives us like, this board that we have on our repo is essentially like it is the definitive truth of the things that we are working on and we think are important. So literally, if you want to go work on one of those things, all you have to do is drop a comment in the issue. You can, you can reach out to me on Twitter. You can email me, like whatever, like any way you can try to get a hold of me, do it, right? One of the things I probably won't do is like one-on-one tutoring for like how to jump onto a project. But what we will do is like we collaborate on GitHub issues to help guide people on how to contribute all the time. And so like I'm more than happy to help enable anybody to get started. A lot of issues are a little more complex. Some are more easy, and we try to label them, the best that we can so that it's easy to see like what to contribute to. In the same way, like you can contribute by jumping into our GitHub discussions and just like helping people. Um, you can help with our documentation. Like when we merge a PR in Webpack, we have a checkbox that says this should have documentation. And so if you go to our docs page, you'll actually see a bunch of auto-generated PRs, or I'm sorry, auto-generated issues that give you a link to the PR of the change that was made. And it just says, hey, we need docs for this. So like you could like, you don't even have to know the exact feature. You can look at the original PR that it's linked to. You can, have a message to the author and be like, hey, is this right? Like, is this doc update correct? And like, you can instantly start contributing right away to our docs as well. And not only that, we have an entire org. So github.com/webpackcontrib. That is all of our loaders and all of our plugins. So let's just say you want to like, you think something's really cool in a specific loader or a plugin, you can go ahead and just help do maintenance work there because all of these things need upkeep. And so, there's no wrong way to contribute. And if you have a better idea, you can always just ask, reach out and say like, hey, would this be good? Or, hey, I want to work on this project. put yourself out there, and the least that I can say is that I'll try my best to help bring you closer, or help elevate that passion that you have for wanting to contribute to Webpack.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and it's so rewarding to put yourself out there in open source. So someone was asking if I can paste the URL. Unfortunately, GitHub disables links. So just for like spam content, stuff like that. So I can't actually paste it. But I am showing them on the screen. And if you miss it, this is recorded. So just rewatch it and go ahead and manually type it in. But the repository is github.com/webpack/webpack. And then the project board is github.com/org/webpack/project/4. So definitely a bit of a mouthful, but definitely check that out. Put yourself out there. Like if you heard Sean's story earlier, I think that's like a perfect example of why you should put yourself out there. Only one more question about your journey, and then it's just like what's been the most rewarding part for you of maintaining a project?
Like, I thought this one made me think a bit. I think like it's a balance, right? Like, I got into Webpack because like I love building tools that make me feel the way that I did when I first tried it, right? And so like I love giving developers a sense of joy. And so like one of the things is like creating a feature that solves somebody's problem and makes their life easier feels so good, right? But I think also like it's rewarding because like if I wouldn't be here today, working at Microsoft, helping being on a team that maintains this huge monorepo for OneDrive and SharePoint that uses Webpack, like, I wouldn't, if I didn't contribute, right? So, like, I think like there's so many like different ways to kind of count my blessings here. I think also like being able to let other people work on open source full time, right? Like we have a full time maintainer on our project, and the fact that we can enable him to do that as his full time job feels great, right? Because like you, there needs to be more sustainability. So like I think it's so satisfying to help other people, pursue their passions, or to make their dev experiences better. And like I think that's why I continue to help maintain the project today.
I love it. I love it. You seem like someone that just likes to help people.
Yeah,
Um,
it feels good. Yeah.
Laura said, something I would love for projects to do if they have bandwidth is office hours. Yes, I used to be a professor, like live onboarding for new contributors.
So
That's a
Laura,
good
actually, once a month we have a Webpack maintainer roadmap meeting, and it's open to the public. So like, if you are interested, if anybody is interested in this, they like DM me your email, and I'll put you on the invite. It's like a Teams like meeting, and so like I can't send a public link to it, but I'm happy. Like we use this for question and answers, especially for large companies that you like. Shopify is a great example, or like some folks at other teams at Microsoft that use Webpack, they get to jump in and join and ask questions. So like we treat this as like an office hours opportunity, and I think that's great. Like I completely agree with you. One of the things I want to find is like a better format so that it's more public accessible. But yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I want to do the same. I maintain a very, very simple project, very like not that much code. But I want to like Twitch stream helping people, and I did start off doing that, but I know some people are like not as comfortable like being streamed. But yeah, I think that's like a great idea to do as well. Okay, cool. Now switching in, wow, it hit 2 o'clock. Switching into the non-technical questions, and then we will wrap it up. So, what was the first programming language that you ever learned?
AppleScript. I was actually, so I didn't go to school for computer science. I'm actually a music major. And so when I got out of college, I just wanted a tech support job, right? And so like something that paid better than like being a server or a waiter at a restaurant. So
Yeah.
one of the things I started doing as I got kind of tired of doing the same tasks over and over again is I started writing AppleScript scripts to automate my tech support process through the day. And so that's kind of
That's
like where I got my first taste of programming.
that is so exciting. Hold on. Oh. Could you? Okay, cool. I like switched browsers really quickly, and then I was
Sure.
like, which one was I on? Okay, my other question to you is, if money wasn't an issue, how would you like ideally spend your time?
So like I think about this sometimes. Like if I so for like job wise, like if I could choose any dream job and money didn't matter, I think I'd probably like retire from Microsoft and like go be a choral conductor. Like, I have a music degree. Choral conducting was like my passion. I love vocal performance. And I used to direct choirs, on the side when I was living in Nebraska. And so like I would love to go do that for like universities and like maybe do more, maybe get my doctorate in music. Like music was one of my passions. So like maybe that would be one thing. I think non-job wise, like I just spend more time in the mountains hiking. Like I love hiking. I do crazy hikes every Saturday morning, or like every other Saturday morning. And so like I love it out here in the Pacific Northwest, and I would love to like just go travel and do more of that, or just like spend time with my family.
Yes, I love how multifaceted you are. And actually, I noticed that a lot of like people who like to code, they love music. Like my husband, he's been a musician since he was a kid, and I'm like, I wonder if there's like some kind of correlation. I don't know, like being able to
There might
read
be.
music and yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, my other question is, I know you work on Webpack, so maybe that's your dream open source project. But if you have another dream open source project that you would love to create one day, I'd love to hear about it.
Okay, so like I thought about this question a lot, and like there maybe isn't like one exact open source project I would want to work for, like, but like one I just thought about attributes of a dream open source project. So like I said, like if I wanted to like chose another project, like some things that I would want from it are like one that has fully funded maintainers. I think that would be absolute dream. Or like one that has like a diverse and fully funded group of maintainers. One that's not like commercial open source. Like no offense to anybody out there who like makes commercial open source. Like there's a lot of cool stuff. But one of the problems is that at the end of the day, you're like a VC funded, or like, you're funding yourself kind of through the work you do. And so like, your motives are always going to be, how do we make money to sustain ourselves? And like one of the things we love about Webpack is that our goal is, how do we solve problems for people, and let's figure out how to fund it, as a secondary goal, right? So like, um, I think one of these dream attributes is like one that is fully funded, that isn't commercial open source, where like solving problems for a diverse group of people, is at the forefront, right? Really listening to customer signals. And then I think maybe like the last thing is an optional bullet point. It would be cool to work on like an intersection between music and technology. Like there's a lot of cool stuff out there. Like, who knows? Like maybe if I ever got the time to look into it, I would. But yeah, I think
That would
those would
be
be some of the
cool.
things.
Maybe something like Sonic Pi or any, I don't know. Anything could be cool. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Um, Laura said, computer science is math. Computer science is math you can see, and music is math you can hear. That's cool. I like that. That's my version of why there's such a large intersection between those interest groups. And then someone also asked that they mentioned they're economists pretending to develop things, or you're an economist and a developer, own it. And they said, at what age did you take that turn? I started learning to code when I was 21, so pretty not that young. I
Yeah, like
don't
I
know.
started when I was like 24, I think, or 25. Like it's never too late, right? And
Yeah,
what's so cool about learning to program, it's like the resources are everywhere, right?
yeah,
There's so many resources for just getting started. Like my second language was Ruby, right? And so like I remember just using the try Ruby tutorials.
yeah,
Like, there's like what is it? Code freecodecamp.org, like nonprofits that just dedicate themselves to giving you the bootstraps to get a career in tech, right? Like,
yeah,
it's crazy to think that like, I was in tech support learning how to write Ruby and Objective-C eventually, and being promoted to software engineer. I can't believe where I'm at today, right?
yeah,
But it's possible, and anybody can do it, right?
yeah.
So put yourself out there, learn to be able to fail. I think maybe that's one of the things about being a music major is that every time you touch an instrument, learn a song, like you're failing, right? Until you get it perfect.
Yeah,
And you know what?
that's
You may never get it perfect. And so, like, I think being conditioned to be okay with failing makes you better at getting started with programming, right? Because you're already like, oh, I messed it up. Okay, whatever. Like, what's new? Let's try again. Let continue to iterate as you learn. And so, like, having like a strong, what's the way, like a tough exterior towards approaching failure, I think is huge and takes you a long way in learning how to program.
Yeah, I love that you said that. Yeah, I try to think of failure as like me growing, right? Like this is like I might be having imposter syndrome about something, but I'm like, this is the moment of growth. Like this challenge is going to help me
Yes.
to grow. So love that you pointed that out. Okay, we have like I want to make sure we end that at the 10-minute
Sure,
mark.
sure, sure. Sure. Yeah, no worries. We had 3 minutes.
So, do you say for the word GIF, do you say GIF or do you say GIF?
I say GIF. I say GIF
GIF.
most of the time.
Okay.
I had to think about
Sometimes
this,
you
but I think
say
it's GIF.
okay. And then, what's your favorite Beyonce song?
I spent some time researching this, and I,
Excited.
like in my workout this morning, I was playing the Beyonce discography. I think it's a tie between two songs.
Okay.
So one is "Break My Soul," which is an
Yeah.
absolute banger. Can I
Yes.
break my the best part is when she's like, "Can I break my soul? Can I
Yeah.
break my soul?" And she puts that little fire behind it. Oh my gosh, I love
Yes.
that. And then the second one is Superpower featuring Frank Ocean. I'm a huge Frank
Ooh,
Ocean enjoyer. And like
yeah.
literally all the harmonies and everything. Like I grew up in Detroit, and so I have
Yeah.
a huge exposure to R&B, and so I love that song. It's really good.
Yes. Thank you. Oh my god. We've okay. I ask this every single session, and we've had a period of like people who never listen to Beyonce, or they're like, "She's not my favorite," and I'm like, "Ah, my heart." Okay, so thank you so much.
There's always a favorite in there, right? Like you just gotta
Yeah,
find
yeah. I'm like, y'all just gotta listen. You're gonna
it.
find one that you love. There's way too many songs for you to not. Okay, so
Exactly.
thank you so much for your time. I really felt this like Twitch stream to be really enjoyable. Like this episode was really great. We have other people saying like it was good, so good to listen to this session. I appreciate the comments as well. I love that y'all were like really engaged. You added in other thoughts and asked really great questions. So I really appreciate it. And then just reminding you all, if you wanted to contribute or find your way into Webpack in some way, go ahead to github.com/webpack/webpack. And there's also the project board here as well. You might have to rewatch to make sure you catch the link. Is there any last things you wanted to promote or anything that you want people to watch out for?
I guess like if you don't follow me on Twitter, like check me out on Twitter. My Twitter handle's at the Larkin,
Yeah.
with two N's. Like check me out on Twitter. Like find me on GitHub. It's the same handle.
Yeah.
I guess like you can take a look at the projects we work on at Microsoft on my team, which is Microsoft/RushStack.
Yeah.
Especially if you're doing stuff in a big monorepo. So, but otherwise, like thank you everybody for asking such good questions. Like I love the trolling. Like I like people challenging, like Veet users, keep using Veet guys. Like, but if you need to scale, use Webpack, like whatever. Like
Yeah.
use the tool that just makes you feel good and makes your development more productive. I think that's most important to me. So thank you for having me so much.
Of course. All right, y'all. Have a great rest of your Friday. Bye.
See ya.